grandmother was an incredible woman. And I don't know if she's become more incredible because my imagination has added stories over the years, or if she really was as incredible as I remember her being. She was born in 1905, and she married my grandfather. She had actually she was engaged to 3 other men at the time that she became engaged to my grandfather. My grandfather was a cobbler's son. He was poor. He didn't have, at the time, they were both very young, but my grandmother was from a very wealthy family. They made furniture and were also the local undertakers, so they got you coming and going. But he was considered a man of no prospects at the time, but my grandmother saw something very special in him. And her family had immigrated to the United States at a much earlier time than my grandfather's. They were pretty much right off the boat. So my grandmother had 3 other suitors at the time that my grandfather successfully proposed to her. And the first time he proposed, he brought her a small diamond. And she said to him, "If that's as special as you think I am, then I'm not the woman for you." And so instead he went out and he bought her this absolutely beautiful pearl. And she wore that until the day she died and became his wife, obviously, because he told her that she was like a pearl. She was tough and strong and independent and one of a kind. And that's exactly what she wanted to hear. And my grandfather always treated her like that. And she was quite the matriarch of our family. And she did, she seemed in some ways like she was an incredible princess. But she was also a very strong and tough woman at a time when most women weren't considered tough or strong, and weren't supposed to be either. She grew up calling her parents by their first names, which was very unusual for her time. Her mother was a suffragist, and so she was pretty open-minded and liberal in her philosophies. She started riding horses astride, and bicycles were just coming out at that time, and bicycles were apparently way too dangerous. My great-grandfather would not allow my grandmother to ride a bike. It was just too dangerous. But he would let her take her Arabian horse over a 6-foot fence. Well, they didn't make it. And she broke both of her ankles, and the horse, of course, broke more than that and had to be put down. But the doctors told my grandmother she would never walk again. And she was only 16 years old at the time. And she walked again. And then she also had horses later in life, and she got run over by a drunk driver in a truck. And she crawled off the horse and laid on him until help came to put the horse down. And she had broken her back. And at the time, that was a very bad injury. And again, they told her that she was never going to walk again. But she did. She did walk. And in fact, my grandfather and my grandmother loved their horses so much. They used to be part of a bit and spur club. And so they actually would take their horses with this other group of friends that they had up into the mountains of Montana and Canada. And up in the mountains in Montana and Canada, into the Rockies, they would have these huge parties. They had cabins. It wasn't the kind of camping where it's, pretty laid back. They were pretty well outfitted. And they used to have these huge parties and enjoy the great outdoors. My grandfather was an avid trout fisherman, so he was in his heaven. And my grandmother actually, although she didn't like the roughing it part of it, she was still amenable to going. And in fact, their cabin once had my grandmother had been cooking all day, and he came to see what they were cooking. She was cooking. It smelled good to him. And of course, to hear my grandmother tell the story, it was a big, big grizzly bear, but more likely it was probably a black bear. Either way, it's pretty unusual for a woman to grab her broom and chase a full-grown bear out of a cabin in the woods, and she did that, it's pretty funny. So, the other thing that they used to do is every year, in fact, I brought a picture to tell you all about it. They would have a big party, and they would have a beauty contest. And I wrote some notes on the back. This happened in the 1940s. It's with the Canadian Trail Riders Association, and they used to call this Talent Night. Now, there were 2 nights, and one night, the women dressed up as men, and on the second night, the men dressed up as women. And so this is my grandfather in drag. Pretty funny. These guys are all long gone by now, but the fact that they would even do this and somebody would actually take pictures is pretty hilarious. So that's, and how many people can actually say that they have a picture of their grandfather in drag? And you can see my grandmother, who was a millionaire, actually made his hat because it's a pretty nice hat for that time. But she was an incredible woman, and all through her life, she died when she was 96. All through her life, she inspired me and challenged me to think about things in different ways than I'd ever thought about before. And I will always love her and remember her.